Welcome to an updated real-time strategy video. In my previous video I listed the top 10 factions that need an update to properly fit in with their lore and history. After reading through some of your guys' comments, I've decided to include a few others I think could do with a bit of love. So this video will list my top 20 factions that I think need an update to flesh out their faction and make them unique in the old world and in closer line with their lore. I'm not discussing factions that need buffing or nerfing, I am discussing factions that need to be updated to be more in line with their history, units, lore, and properly fill their place in the old world. So no specific updates to units or stats will be present in this video. With that said, I hope you enjoy the video. The best way for you to show your support is by subscribing to my channel. I have weekly Warhammer content ranging from top 10s, gameplay, lore and history videos. If you enjoy listening to someone outlining a specific faction or character's lore, then please click subscribe to join in the fun and make my day. Remember that this is just my opinion and I would love for you to share yours below in the comments. I love how passionate you all are about the Warhammer world and really do enjoy reading all of your discussions. Number 20. The Pirates of Saratosa. At number 20 is a small faction that just needs a little tweaking to feel more like pirates. The clue is in the name. Currently when playing the Tomb Kings etc, the pirates to the north are nowhere to be seen for most of the campaign. In my Cetra campaign, it was only until I've actually collected the 5 books in Nagash they sent an army of 3 units to raid Zandri. In my Tyrian campaign, I saw them in turn 121. They should be raiding ports, coastlines and patrolling the sea north of the Hekara as an early game challenge. Force you into the sea more often. When you do finally get to see them in battle, they don't even look like pirates. Some skin updates, abundance of free militia and cannons and some bombardment abilities in battle could give this faction a more piratey feel and make them feel less like filler. Number 19. Arachnos. What a good opportunity this faction could be for orcs and goblins to receive their sub-faction, the Forest Goblins, into the game. Arachnos could be filled with goblin infantry more akin to the ones on top of the Arachnorok spiders. They would have no armour, be faster and be very colourful. The faction would have a lot of poison attacks and be very fast moving. With the Bowmen of Orion close by, it's a great chance for them to be filled out a little. It would also give the Tomb Kings a unique starting challenge in the east, slowing down their fast chariots and cavalry with their poison attacks. Number 18. Hag Grief. The home of Malice Darkblade. This faction is currently a stepping stone to conquering the wastes the Dark Elves call home. Except this faction is just another faceless, minor, bland Dark Elf faction, where in fictional reality it should be home to one of the most famous Dark Elves to ever be printed on paper. This faction could do with a 3LC update where it includes Malice as a legendary lord for this faction, and with his arrival it could lead to some interesting and unique abilities, negatives and buffs for the Dark Elves of Hag Grief. As a fan of his books, I would love this minor faction to be fleshed out a little. Number 17. The Strygos Empire. An empire of ghouls in the Badlands that once nearly drove the Greenskins out of the region. They were that powerful. The Strygos Empire is a faction that has no semblance to its unique history or past. There should be a heavy, if not complete, focus on ghouls in the army. The only reason they aren't higher on my list is because this empire was actually destroyed entirely by Dork Redeye and his orc army, so their inclusion at the time of the game is set wouldn't make much sense. But if they are in the game anyway, they should mimic their lore and history, instead of not. Number 16. Cult of Sotec. The land of Tehenuane and his cult of the serpent god Sotec seems to be the next DLC lord for the Lizardmen, so this pick for number 16 may be premonition. But with no skink legendary lords and no proper presence of Sotec in the game, this would be a good opportunity to include him, and maybe the Ark of Sotec. It would only need to fill out the Lizardmen faction's variety a little more, but it would also be a chance to include more skink heavy focused armies which Tehenuane would lead. Much like Skarsnik is for the Goblins of Crooked Moon, Tehenuane is for the skinks of Sotec. It's a big chunk of the Lizardmen history that is currently missing, so it's a good chance to update the faction. Number 15. Clan Moulder. The first of a few Skaven clans on my list. I'll be detailing specific reasons for the Skaven's inclusion in this list in later factions. Clan Moulder armies should be monstrous. They should be filled with Moulder's mad abominations and rat ogres, with many Skaven slaves and the possible inclusion of giant rats. But like many other Skaven armies, Moulder is just generic, and doesn't really represent the clan's strengths and focus. With that said, this faction needs an update to better represent its roots. Number 14. Trace. Trace should be led by Alistair the White Lion. They should have strong infantry focus with buffs for White Lion's units. This would also be a great opportunity to include the White Lion's chariots into the game. A unique unit for the faction until you confederate or conquer. It will give a bit of diversity to Ulthuan where the sub-factions of elves can feel a bit samey. Trace is one that has enough of a unique history that it could stand out on its own, which is why it's on my list. Also, because I really want to see the White Lion chariots in the game. Number 13. Middenland. Poor Boris Todbringer. The cult of Ulrich is an important aspect of the Empire history, and Middenland itself is a very powerful and important chunk of the Empire. So having this faction not represent its own unique story is a real shame. Creative Assembly did include Boris in an update, but he isn't playable in the campaign as a starting legendary lord. Even if you confederate with Middenland, he isn't recruitable, he just disappears. He's only playable in multiplayer and custom battles, which is a real shame. The Cult of Ulrich is such a unique religious sub-faction which could easily be represented on already in-use game models with some skin updates. I will mention the Cult of Ulrich in more detail in a future video, but for now, Middenland is definitely a faction that needs some love. If I'm wrong about Boris, let me know. Number 12. The Border Princes. Stuck between a rock and a hard place. The rock being Belegar, and the hard place being Thorgrim and all the greenskin hordes to the south. Border Princes see a lot of action in the campaigns I have played and watched. They even invaded Schwarzhafen in my Vampire Counts Let's Play. A land of political refugees, adventurers and pirates, the Border Princes is a region of smaller kingdoms, started by highly ambitious adventurers and full of raiders and bandits. It's a dangerous land, with a multitude of different mercenary companies roaming through it, most likely on their way to Tilea. This faction doesn't really convey all of what I just mentioned. They are another Empire faction full of armoured soldiers. They should be a lot more varied, aggressive, wild, unpredictable and colourful. A dangerous enemy when backed into a corner. An update for this faction would be great. Number 11. Mousillon. The Red Duke is a force to be reckoned with. He is a solid Lord pick for the multiplayer, but his region and forces in the campaign don't really convey Mousillon's backstory. I've always found them to be a bit jarring when compared to the forces around them. Dead Bretonnians fill a majority of their roster, so their normal infantry should look like dead Bretonnians raised from the dead. They were a kingdom of Bretonnia once after all, so this should be apparent in their appearance. This faction update will just make them fit better with their surroundings and properly show their place in Bretonnia's lore. Number 10. Estalia. Once invaded by Araby, Estalia is currently a carbon copy of the Empire faction, just in different colours. They claim to be the first humans to settle the old world, though many ignore this claim. They are politically divided into many smaller factions due to no ruling government, but currently in the game they are just another block of differently named Empire men when they should be smaller provinces split across the region. They have very hardy castles and fortresses as they are newer builds than their northern cousins. They are continuously pestered by Skaven, which should also be apparent in the region. Skaven Blight is currently around the area, but with no starting faction legendary lord starting there, it seems like a lost opportunity. They are at number 10 because they aren't that different than what they are currently, but they could be much more, and actually follow their lore a bit closer. So I believe these guys should have an update. Number 9. Vampire Coasts. At number 9 on my list is the Vampire Coasts faction. In the lore, they are basically undead pirates of the Caribbean. They were mostly originally Norscans who died and were risen again in undeath due to Luthor Harkon residing inside a coffin the Norscans had stolen from an Imperial trade ship. They are allies with Sirens, have a complete naval presence in their region, and are raiders, murderers and pillagers of the New World. Having undead pirates would be incredible, but they aren't that. Vampire Coasts are just another Vampire Counts faction with no hint of their origin or lore anywhere to be found. Please update them to make them petty raiders with undead free militia companies, cannons, sirens and a pescal naval presence, as they should be. Number 8. Clan Eshin. Skaven clans in general need an update. I go into this more later in my list, but at number 8 is Clan Eshin. Currently, if you come across a Skaven Clan Eshin army, you can expect the same armies as other Skaven clans: slaves, slingers, ogres and so on. However, it should be that if you are facing an army of Clan Eshin, you should expect lots of death runners, sneaky tactics, and your general to be assassinated before you even get to deploy. There is a lack of variety in many of the clans, one which is noticeable for anyone who wanted a bit more individual diversity in the factions. But Eshin especially should be a unique challenge, but it simply isn't. This faction needs an update, especially since they are one of the 4 great clans. Number 7. Chaos. With Creative Assembly leaving Chaos for the 3rd installment of the game, this is only number 7 on my list because this update is inevitably coming, but it's still worth mentioning. Chaos is such a varied faction, as varied as the Chaos Gods themselves, but currently there are no real differences in the Chaos faction. It is one of the most varied factions available in the lore and history of Warhammer, 4 different avenues to go down, each with their own unique traits, units and heroes. There are no units that look like they belong to Nurgle, Khorne, Slaanesh or Tzeentch, bar a few heroes and sorcerers. Just Chaos undivided forces with no unique god backing them. When the update comes for this one, it will truly be a force to be reckoned with, and one that will bring much variety and colour to the battlefield. Number 6. The Necrarch Brotherhood. South of Cetra lives the Necrarch Brotherhood, the most learned of the vampire race. Known to be more powerful with spells than swords, unlike their Von Karstein kin. This power of the winds of magic comes at a price, however. They are disfigured, ugly creatures with an appearance so hideous that no man can gaze upon them unaffected. The father of the vampires, Wisoran, lives in the land of the dead and was truly faithful to Nagash in life and death. Just like the Vampire Coast faction, the Necrarch Brotherhood are yet again just a cookie-cutter copy and paste of the Von Karstein-esque vampire faction. The Necrarch Brotherhood should have very powerful magic and be hard to negotiate with in diplomacy due to their madness and distrust of all. Their leaders should also cause terror to fit in with their history. This faction needs an update to give the original vampires a bit of love and to give the Tomb Kings a more unique vampire faction to face. Number 5. Tilea. One of the wealthiest provinces in the Old World, known for their trade, the Tileans pride themselves on cultural advancement and wealth. They are not a military might by any means, but are definitely a trade juggernaut in the Old World. So you would think that Tilea is the faction you want to do trade with and speed towards, not the High Elves of Ulthuan, but currently that is not the case. Tilea is a province filled with wealthy merchants, trade ships and mercenaries. Because of their wealth, they can afford to buy out many Dogs of War units to fight their rivals and trade competition. So when a Tilean army is on the map, it should be filled with a random assortment of men, elves, dwarves and ogres, all fighting for coin. But it is yet again another army filled with Empire soldiers, cannons and pistoliers. Tilea should be a great unique human faction, one that sends rogue armies out against you in return for a bad trade deal, or taking out one of their biggest trade partners. Not just another human Empire faction. I feel like this one needs a bit of an update. Number 4. The Northern Dwarven Kingdoms, Kraka, or the Norse Dwarves. Usually a quick faction to disappear from the epic roster of faction names at the end of a turn, the northern dwarven kingdoms have a hard start as they are pinned between Norsca and Chaos, with Kislev to the south. They have been separated from their brethren for over 7,000 years. They have been fighting for just as long and have some of the toughest strongholds in the old world. Many slayers travel up north to fight the many monsters, giants and dragons that roam their lands. So this faction should be a hard challenge to dig out of their fortifications, and have a plethora of wide-eyed, orange-haired dwarven slayers accompanying them into battle. Kraka Drak should be a hard-fought battle, but a worthy one, as it stands on the biggest sapphire, silver and iron deposits in the old world. With a harbour nearby, it should be a huge target for trade factions. This faction should be tougher, slower, and be more of a brick wall than their southern cousins, and have buffs against monsters and chaos forces due to their 7,000 years of experience fighting them. A nice faction to update. Number 3. Clan Skyre. There are many Skaven clans on the game map, both warlord clans and great clans. Most recently, Clan Rictus was included in the game with Tretch Craventail leading the clan. I've already mentioned Clan Eshin earlier in this list, but there are also Skyre, Sotec and Moulder and the Greyseers. In the lore and tabletop, each clan has a speciality and special units. Pestilence is all about the Plague Monks and Plague Censors. Moors is the frontline meat shield warrior clan famous for their storm vermin. But this doesn't shine through in the game at all. All Skaven have all units and are just generic ratmen. They may as well be just generic clans at the moment. But in reality, facing a Clan Skyre army would be a real challenge. This clan is famous for their technology and abuse of warpstone machinery. So when facing a Clan Skyre army, you should expect warp lightning cannons, warp throwers, warp lock engineers and lots of doom wheels, not hordes of Skaven slaves, plague catapults and storm vermin. This AI faction needs to be updated to show their actual clan's units, weaponry and ideals. Instead of the same Skaven armies in all clans, this would open variety to specific clan armies you face. Skyre is one of these, and it's higher on my list because of the challenge they would create. Why can't Skaven clans be like the Night Goblins and Skarsnik, where you can only recruit certain Skaven units until you take a certain settlement, where you get buffs and upkeep reductions for the clan's specific units? An update that would definitely give more variety to the base game and Skaven in general. Number 2. Norsca. Why haven't these been added into Total War Warhammer 2 yet? For a year, players of the first installment faced giant blobs of Marauder infantry, chariots, and the dreaded Marauder horseman spam. Then Norsca finally gets released with one of the coolest unit rosters to date just before the second installment of the game. Then back to square one in Warhammer 2, when the Mortal Empires campaign was released. Back to giant blobs of Marauder spam, chariot spam, and horseman spam. This faction needs updating in the second game. All the assets are there, they just need to implement them into it. This one is extra frustrating because we know how good and fun this faction can be to play and play against, but this is becoming a distant memory, unless you want to hop between the two games, which completely defeats the purpose of the Mortal Empires campaign. Norsca needs an update. Surtha Ek needs to have more than axe-throwing horsemen again. This update is coming on May 10th granted, so at least we know it's coming soon, but it doesn't take away the frustration. Number 1. Kislev. The front line of civilization, the Empire, and the faction that takes the burden of the first waves of Chaos Hordes decade after decade. This faction is noticeably absent from the game, and has been many on the fans' minds as to where these polar bear riding stoic men of men will be included into the game. A line from Lord of the Rings suits Kislev perfectly. By the blood of our people are your lands safe. And this epitomizes the faction's place in the world. They are the first ward Chaos breaks upon in the end times and in previous Chaos invasions. They defend their lands and the lands of all those southern kingdoms with their own unique units, magic, heroes, monsters and cavalry. They would make an incredible faction to update with its proper roster. Instead, they are currently in the same pit as many other human Empire factions. Generic Holy Roman Empire-esque armoured soldiers armed with muskets and pointy moustaches. Kislev deserves some love. They would be a great starting challenge for Norsca and Chaos Army campaign starts, and would help differentiate the giant blob of human factions that takes up so much of the map in the mainland Warhammer world. Free LC, paid DLC, whatever way, it would be great for them to be included. This is the faction that needs updating the most. Thank you for watching my updated video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave your opinions down below. I will see you next time.